Welcome to the second coffee chat in the EdReports four-part summer learning series. We are delighted to have so many of you joining us again. If you're coming back the second time or if this is your first time, we're happy you're here. My name is Pasha Spencer, and I'm the Senior Specialist of Partnerships, and I'll be your facilitator today and throughout this series. We are so excited to share so many learnings with you and uncover lots of information regarding the state of the materials market. Today's session will focus on the question of why standards aligned materials are available and not being used. We invite you to sit back, grab your cup of coffee, and enjoy. Let's go ahead and dive in. So I will briefly go over some housekeeping. The first is this webinar will be recorded and available in a follow-up email. There will be related resource links that will be entered into the chat and will be included in a follow-up email. A live transcript will be generated by Zoom, so please be patient if you notice any errors that may occur. We have a few different ed reporters that are helping us behind the scenes today, so please feel free to use the chat and the Q&A features depending on your question. So for use of the chat feature, you can notify the EdReports team of any technical difficulties that you may have. And then for use of the Q&A feature, you can use that to submit content-specific questions throughout the webinar. We'll have people answering those as well as a planned section for questions and answers. And then tag at EdReports and use the hashtag Materials Matter, as well as the hashtag Curriculum Chat on Twitter, and we'll be sure to follow you. So we have three panelists joining us today. The first is Dr. Melissa Galloway, who is an online adjunct instructor for the University of the People. She's also the founder of E3 Consulting LLC, as well as an EdReports Clave Fellow. She previously served as a principal with Columbia Public Schools in Missouri, as well as a principal and assistant principal with Broken Arrow Public Schools in Oklahoma. We also have Jonathan Regino, who is the supervisor of teaching and learning for STEM at the Marple Newton School District in Pennsylvania and an EdReports Clave Fellow. He spent over a decade as a middle school math and science teacher and worked for a number of years at the state level as a professional development specialist for Delaware County Intermediate Unit. And then we also have Marquis Alvarados, who is a math specialist here at EdReports, and he has more than a decade of experience in the educational arena. He has served as a mathematics teacher, a department chair, coordinator of academics and initiatives, a director of data and assessments, as well as a data consultant. So thank you, Melissa, Jonathan, and Marquis. I look forward to our conversation today. So I'll briefly go over our agenda. We have 4 key items. The first is you'll hear about EdReports and what we do, our expertise, as well as our impact. And then you'll hear background context about the state of the materials market, as well as details about findings 1 and 2. Then we'll dig even deeper into those findings with our panelist discussion and Q&A. And then I will close with some next steps that are important, things to look forward to, and also what to expect over the next 2 weeks. So I will start with sharing an overview of our mission here at EdReports. So we work to support educators by providing information and support about high quality instructional materials. And we do this in 2 primary ways. We work directly with educator reviewers who conduct reviews of instructional materials that we provide free of charge, with the goal of building awareness of the quality of aligned materials and what materials are on the market. We also work directly with states and districts to support their work in identifying quality materials for their local context. Our work has a direct influence on being able to make strong local decisions around instructional materials. And as a result, this really feeds into our theory of action. So our reviews allow us to identify what excellence looks like in materials. Those reviews, as well as the direct support that we provide for states and districts really enable local educators to demand excellent materials. And we've actually seen the market really respond to that demand by improving the materials that they're publishing and releasing for educators to use. And if you joined us for session 1, that's certainly something that you heard more within the state of the materials market, and you'll continue to hear more about today. We really believe that reliable information against quality criteria in a quickly changing marketplace helps educators make informed purchasing decisions and improve student learning. So our goal is not about telling you what to do, but rather sharing the voices of educators just like you and empowering you to make great decisions for your classroom, for your school, and for your district. So this graphic shows our impact across multiple areas. So this is like EdReports by the numbers. The educators who serve on the EdReports review team have enabled us to have significant impact across various states. So to date, over 800 reviewers from 48 states have contributed to the publication of over 1,000 reports. 105 of the largest 200 districts across the country are using EdReports, and 29 state education agencies or departments have used EdReports for their adoption plans or other work, and more than 30 publishers have made changes to their materials based on EdReports reviews. And our work has impacted over 14 million students. So through our work, through the reports we've published, collaboration with educator reviewers, the districts and states that we provide assistance to, our impact has truly been tremendous. So a little on why materials matter. I'm sure that's something you hear a lot. Through our work, we know that instructional materials matter and that the instructional core is the foundation for the college and career-ready skills that students need. So there's a lot of research to support the fact that materials are one of the most significant factors that impact student learning. We also know that high quality materials are one of teachers' top priorities for where they'd like to see funding spent. Additionally, we know that materials are an important lever for equity and ensuring all students have access to rigorous grade level learning. And then lastly, materials are a cost-effective measure, because the effectiveness of high quality materials compared to those that are not standards aligned generally cost the same amount. So this is a change that can be made without spending a whole lot of additional money. Here's a brief peek at our EdReports Center and the aligned indicators and evidence. So EdReports at our core is about providing information to educators about the quality of materials. As I said earlier, all of our reviews are conducted by educator reviewers across the country and are published for free on our website. And the goal of that is for folks to really be able to dig in and understand the characteristics of what makes quality materials, and then look against those characteristics for the programs that they're considering or programs that they've already adopted. So you can see on the screen, our report center is where we navigate from. Within that, you can select the grade band and subject areas that you're considering, and all of the different reviews that we've completed will show up on that page. You can click next and then see a summary, which is evident here in the middle image that you see there. And then you'll see a list of different programs and how they reflect the characteristics of quality. The far right side is the details of the report. Our educator reviews really do a great job of providing a tremendous amount of detail through the criterion and individual indicators about how these characteristics of quality show up in materials or where there might be gaps. And this is extremely valuable because it not only informs adoption decisions, but it also helps to inform understanding regarding the materials that you may already have. So I'm going to give a brief background and context about the state of the materials market, as well as a glimpse into the 5 findings. So let's start with some background and context. Why this report? Well, this is the 4th annual report that EdReports has produced since 2018, and it's one that continues to prove to be beneficial. As we learned in webinar 1 last week, EdReports started this work because the curriculum market for the K-12 core materials is $8 billion annually, and there's very little information about what is being purchased or used. So through our partnership with the RAND Corporation and combining the data from our reviews, we've been able to put it all together and get a better lens on what's happening. In some of our most recent reports, we were able to do a data snapshot and look at subject area specific work as well. We've received great feedback, and it's been so informative to us operationally as well. And it's also something that our team just enjoys doing. So in alignment with our mission and the reason we do what we do want to help educators and education advocates across the country get a better handle on what's available, what's being selected and purchased, and what's being used. So here are the key findings, and as you are reading them, I will briefly voice them over. So the first is the availability of aligned instructional materials continues to increase. Second finding, despite the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on education, the use of aligned materials has remained consistent to previous years. 3, regardless of alignment, teachers are modifying their instructional materials at similar rates. Finding 4, teachers want materials that are aligned to state standards that offer support for multilingual learners and provide culturally relevant content and approaches, but few believe that the materials will meet these needs. And finally, finding 5, research shows that implementing high quality instructional materials in an environment with supportive leadership, along with ongoing coaching and professional development, will lead to success. So today's conversation is going to center on the first 2 findings, and that aligns directly to the availability of aligned materials. So as we prepare for that conversation, I'm actually going to ground us in what we learned during webinar 1 and share some data with you. So within key finding 1, materials based on our published reports, we see an increase over the past 4 years of materials that meet expectations for standards aligned. So those are the green bars in these graphs. And that is a key takeaway here. Looking closer, we see materials for ELA started off at a somewhat better place than for mathematics, where there was initially only a small percentage of materials that didn't meet expectations for standards alignment in ELA. Looking at the upper left set of bar graphs, we see an increase in materials that meet expectation for standards alignment and a proportional decrease in materials that partially meet expectations. Whereas in math, there was initially a preponderance of materials that did not meet expectations for standards alignment, and the decline there is associated with a proportional increase in materials that meet. So this means that there are aligned options at every grade level for ELA and math. So educators and districts can find materials that best meet their local priorities. The State of the Market report also shows that EdReports has reviewed over 90% of the math and ELA materials market for comprehensive materials. And we are committed to ensuring that we always keep above this mark while also reviewing new products. So this slide shows teachers' regular use of materials. In our previous year State of the Market report, we saw a relatively large increase in the use of materials that meet expectations for standards alignment of about 10% in both ELA and math. That trajectory appears to have leveled off from 2020 to 2021. Now, it's important to know that the 2020 data reflects pre-pandemic numbers, so definitely keep that in mind as you're viewing this. Knowing what we know about how teachers and schools needed to adjust to school closures and shifts towards remote and hybrid models of instruction, the large increase in the use of materials in our unrated category is not very surprising, as that category includes many supplemental programs. And we've seen across multiple studies a large uptick in supplemental programs. Not only are they traditionally easier to procure, but they are also usually available digitally and quickly. It is encouraging to see that the increased use of unrated materials did not come at the expense of use of aligned materials, where the rate of use remained relatively stable. It appears that the increase used of unrated materials occurred with notable decrease in the use of partially aligned and non-aligned materials, and that the prevalence of aligned materials used by teachers held through the disruptions of the pandemics really speaks positively of the benefit of high quality instructional materials that offers teachers. So despite the fairly good news that we didn't see a decline in use, I do want to temper excitement because the survey question is asking educators to share if they are using materials one time a week or more. And that's still a pretty low bar for regular use. So now we're going to move into our panelist discussion. I know that was a lot of data. I'm sure you are burning with questions, and we are anxious to hear from our panelists today. So I want to invite my panelists to unmute themselves as you prepare to respond to each question. We're going to dive into our conversation. I know that all of you have read the State of the Materials Market report, and we have spoken at length leading up to today's conversation. So the first set of questions will focus on just overall reactions and experience with instructional materials, as well as the report. So Jonathan, I'm actually going to start with you. As an educator, what were your initial reactions to key findings 1 and 2? What resonated with you as it pertains to your work with instructional materials?
Thanks, Pasha. With 98% of the material being reviewed out there and only 44% meeting expectations, the way that contracts are negotiated with these textbooks and the way that schools and the length that they adopt materials for, we have a very long window or big open window of how long we're going to be using these materials that don't meet expectations. And at this point, there's almost no excuse not to use material that do meet expectations. There's enough information out there and enough resources. As far as finding number 2, the pandemic really did push us into needing materials that were quickly adaptable to online. And many of our textbooks that we currently use didn't meet that need. So the supplements exploded during the beginning of the pandemic. One of my concerns is how do we rein that back in? And now that everything's wide open, how do we figure out what teachers are using within our schools, and how do we get back to using high quality materials?
Thank you so much for that answer. So I have a follow-up for you, specific to key finding 1, and from your experience, not only as an educator, but also a reviewer with EdReports, what factors do you believe have contributed to the increased availability of aligned instructional materials in the market?
So there's this quote by Tracy Johnson Zager, who wrote, "If you're using curriculum that doesn't work when you try to facilitate it, when you're losing kids left and right because they are bored, frustrated, or can't access the mathematics, it's time to demand a better curriculum." And I feel like we're at this point where teachers, parents, even students are demanding better. And now states pushing out required materials to use, places like EdReports giving suggestions of high quality materials. It's to the point where we are forcing the textbook companies to comply and to put out materials that actually meet our needs. And instead of teachers trying to adapt to the textbooks are trying to adapt to our student needs and our teacher needs.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I especially love that quote. You said it too fast for me to capture it, but hopefully someone on the EdReports team behind the scenes was able to get that. So Marquis, I'm going to bring you into the conversation. What was your experience with high quality instructional materials as a teacher?
Well, reflecting back, going back to the data, we see that 44% meet standard alignment, and this is 2022. So when I think about my decades in the educational arena and as a teacher, I really don't think I have any experience with high quality instructional material, because everything that I saw, everything that I used, everything that was available to me when missing key concepts, wasn't able to help students, and it really broke their confidence into mathematics because they felt they couldn't get something because the gaps were so noticeable.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. I have a follow-up for you as well. So you have experienced two very unique perspectives, obviously as a teacher, former teacher, but now as someone who leads the curriculum review process. What would you say are the hallmarks of a quality review process?
First and foremost, I would say transparency, right? Everything EdReports does is transparent. Like a lot of people may claim, they review and they review certain type of materials, but our whole process is online. Publishers are able to respond back. So we have publisher responses. Publishers are able to, do the background. Timing, if a review is coming out every week for materials and it takes them a week to review it, I'm a little skeptical on that. So our process takes 6 to 8 months. Could we go through every single page of material? And then lastly, I would say knowledge. Our reviewers are online, so you can see the experience they had, the knowledge they have. We have the content knowledge. We take educators throughout the nation to go and work on these reviews.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So I want to move the discussion to focusing on the adoption of, or focusing on adoption and advocating for high quality instructional materials. So Melissa, we're going to bring you in here. So what steps have you taken to build time and capacity in order to leverage instructional materials?
Hi, and thank you so much for having me on the panel, Pasha. Just trying to protect the teacher's time. And I've had the opportunity, even in various districts, to sit on alignment teams. And to do that work and prepare beforehand is so important. So teachers can focus on what they need to do, but also the principals becoming instructional to provide support in the resource and the materials. Because as Jonathan mentioned, we're behind as far as instructional materials in education and instruction. So how do we catch up? And just coming together in professional learning communities and having those conversations about what essential skills that need to be taught.
Thank you, Melissa. And a follow-up for you. So I know that you mentioned during one of our initial conversations that one of the districts in the area that you reside did an adoption about 2 years ago. So from your local context and just some of the research that you've done, what do you think influenced your district's decision to select new materials in the first place?
Number one, because that's the rotation. That is the norm. That is the rotation. But also there was a need because they needed to focus more on literacy and bring students up to par. And this was pre-pandemic. So we can only imagine where our students are right now. But what I liked about it is that there was a team approach and there were a variety of curriculum adoption pieces that were taken into account. And it just wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. It took the entire school year to make that decision. But we still have those gaps. And that's why I'm so grateful for EdReports, because we do touch every page. We do have those crucial conversations to make sure that those materials are aligned. So I certainly hope that the districts in our areas are using EdReports as a part of making those decisions for the curriculum adoptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan, I know probably a lot of what Melissa shared certainly resonates with you. I'd love it if you could share, how have you prioritized the importance of high quality instructional materials to teachers, and what ways can districts support teachers to leverage new materials?
So in my district, we've drawn a line where we're not going to adopt the materials unless it's high quality, unless the evidence is there. That's where the conversation begins. We bring that information into every PD we do. when we start talking about our own materials, we look at the reports first and decide what do we need to do to fix what we have presently in our classrooms.
Love that. Yes. Can you also share with us like any strategies or practices that have worked well?
So I like my philosophy is involve the teachers right from the beginning, have them part of the conversation. Let's find out what they need, what they're looking for. And as we start to look through materials, we match up with the needs first and the high quality material list. And we choose from there. The more that the teachers are involved, the more that they understand what's going on and what goes into high quality materials, the better it is when we actually bring this into the classroom. Too many times we bring something in and only a few people know all the bits and pieces of the curriculum. Only a few people understand the whole purpose of the curriculum. And then we spend a lot more time trying to undo bad habits that they picked up to try to fix what they thought needed to be fixed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And Pasha, can I piggyback off what Jonathan was saying?
Of course.
I totally agree. For the districts in the area where I live, I certainly hope that they will take advantage of the EdReports materials, because it certainly helps with, with looking at those gaps and filling in those gaps that's needed.
Absolutely. And I know, Melissa, you previously mentioned that when materials are aligned, that it helps to build like cohesion among teachers, among staff, the benefits of how that impacts like the culture. What are some of the ways that you've helped to shape and build a strong professional learning community within a school building in the process of adopting new materials?
Number one, being present and a part of those conversations, asking those critical questions and challenging the teachers in the learning community to challenge each other as well. Taking a look at the data to making sure that we have those essential skills that are that need to be taught. Versus just teaching what's fun. And, we want to make it fun, but we want to make sure that we are addressing those essential skills to keep the students on task and on level, because we all know that if students are behind, we have to teach not only that current year, but the previous year to catch them up in that same year. So just having those conversations with teachers, providing resources and what they need, and protecting that instructional time to make sure that they are able to teach, because we know that, times change, but the need for education does not. So just making sure that that time is protected, and going to those professional developments with teachers so we can have those conversations right then, being that instructional leader.
Love that. Yes, very important. Jonathan, a question for you. In regards to research and data, what research and data has influenced your approach to advocating for and using standards-aligned instructional materials?
I think the data point that really opened up my eyes was from TNTP and the opportunity myth. And they share that 581 of the 720 hours are used off quality or not quality materials. We talk about always not having enough time to teach our content. And when you realize that how much of your content that you're teaching isn't even on grade level or isn't high quality, you start to realize we have to revamp everything that we're doing and really rethink of how we're teaching in the classroom and what materials we're using.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Melissa, I'm going to bring it back to you because you alluded to this in another response, and I think it's important to elevate for the conversation. How do you ensure that you're incorporating a diversity of educator voices when it comes to the adoption of new materials? Because that's a big thing for us here at EdReports. So I'd love it if you could talk about that.
Absolutely, and it is critical. just making sure that you're having the right people at the table, making sure, because when you have that horizontal alignment, vertical alignment is important, but you have to have that horizontal alignment so you know where the gaps are from grade level to grade level. Because there are gaps. I think a lot of times we focus on the horizontal conversations. We kind of steer away from those vertical conversations. So having preschool as well as grade in the room, as fifth grade in the room, from the elementary perspective, because there are students, sadly, in fifth grade that are still reading on that kindergarten level. So having those kindergarten teachers to have those conversations of what essential skills that they are teaching and how they can make it more age appropriate for that fifth grader who might be struggling. Because as I learned in my research, with multi-tiered intervention, which is one of my specialties and what I love, is that we only, most of the time, we only look at the surface. And when I talk about the Freudian approach in theory, when you dig down under the surface, there are a lot more things that are going on with the students in the classroom. So that teacher in kindergarten may have had that student who's in fifth grade that can add to that conversation and make sure that we're addressing the right things, just not the essential skills, but that emotional part of it as well. So I think it's important to have that vertical alignment, and also your specialty teachers, such as your librarians and PE teachers. Everyone in the building is important to have at the table and have that input. So I hope I answered your question, Pasha.
Yes, you did. And it was the perfect segue. We're going to move into talking about what can be done, ideas, suggestions, solutions. So Marquis, let's bring you back. What can district leaders do or do more of to improve the use of quality materials?
Well, I want to echo what the two panelists said, my fellow panelists. District leaders, I think the days of just dropping materials to teachers in the beginning of the school year and saying, "Here, what you're doing," and then walking away, I think those days are long gone. It needs to be targeted professional development around teachers want to help their students. So they want to know how did this material aid in my classroom. They know who their students are. They know what difficulty they experience. So besides the dropping off the material, but doing professional development and PLCs around how the material could help them and help their students is actionable. And that's what's going to get them on board to improve that. When teachers see how it's going to help them, they'll use it. No teacher is going to walk away from that and say, "Oh, this is going to help. I'm going to do something different."
Makes a lot of sense. Jonathan, in your experience, what do you think are some of the primary factors for why teachers and districts are not using quality materials? Do you think it's a lack of access, lack of training? In terms of what can be done, I'd love to hear what you feel about that.
So I think there's a few issues going on. There's the long-term contracts. So you're stuck using something that you realize isn't high quality, and there's nothing you can do about it because the money's already spent. We have issues with publishers now only offering webinars as training or 1 hour trainings. Like the idea of year-long trainings have slowly disappeared. And then the other piece is, in the classroom, most texts aren't meeting the needs of special ed students, EL students, gifted students, or even that one student who slightly goes off track and misses the point of the lesson today. You're looking for materials to support those students, and the regular textbook isn't doing it right now.
Yeah, definitely. Marquis, this question's for you. How do you recommend that teachers advocate for better materials?
I was very simply, never stop. Keep talking, get caregivers involved, right? in my experience, the caregivers move the conversation forward, whether they're parents, guardians, etc. When you have the built-in of the community and when they care about it and they want what's best for their student, you tell them, hey, I know something's better out there. This is how you do it. They could come to you and get them on board as advocates to talk to your district leaders, to talk to your principal, to talk to people like your superintendent, so that involving everybody, involving the students, involving the caregivers, like I said, involving the district leaders.
Thank you so much. And lastly, for you, any guidance that you can offer educators that may be joining us today around their decision-making process when it comes to the type of materials or content that will best support their students?
Yeah, so my colleague just shared with me yesterday an article that was extremely relevant to this. And it talks about just how they went to how they were able to extend the school year. So it's Dr. Latanya Goffney, and how they were able to extend the school year from regular school year to, like, I think 210 days, right? But the way they did that, they planned. So it's a year-long process. Once again, they involved every single part of that community. So they made sure they talked to the teachers, they talked to the parents, they talked to the district leaders, and they planned out how it was going to impact and what the impact they wanted to be. So having a plan set, having the time to meet with different stakeholders, definitely helps.
Awesome. Well, with that, we are going to move into a Q&A portion. We certainly would love to hear. I just see so many icons popping up here, so many great conversations that are coming in. So let me take some of the questions here from our attendees. So the first is a question related to teacher professional learning. What supports and resources have you found teachers need in implementing new materials? In particular, how do you address mindsets that materials may take away teacher autonomy? And how do you support teachers to navigate materials that feel dense compared with what they are used to? And anyone can take that one.
I will take that one. I've had some experience. As far as supporting the teachers with the materials and showing it just takes conversations. Not only does it take the materials, it also takes the data. But once you begin to look at the alignment of the curriculum and look at the standard need to be taught, it kind of drives what teachers do. As far as taking away that autonomy, that's one of the biggest fears. But once the teachers begin to look at the standards, they'll say, well, oh, I've already taught this, or this is the way I taught this deal. But when they begin to get into learning communities and they begin to, not just across their grade levels, but when they begin to have conversation with other teachers in other grade levels and looking at students who are falling behind and looking at the students that they have to take to, that they want to take to the next level, already know it. It kind of just happens organically. Because we all know that teachers are there to help students. That's their hearts and that's their passions. And we as teachers, we're just going to do what we're supposed to do anyway. But we can always be creative and add that autonomy. So once they begin to get into the materials and dig deeper into those materials, it kind of happens organically because of our passion for students and what we do.
Thank you, Melissa. One question for Jonathan. Can you expand on the ideas you shared about what PD teachers need around aligned materials to meet the needs of their students?
So I think at this point, textbooks have gotten very deep and they have a lot to them, a lot of resources, a lot of extra supplements. And it's hard for a teacher who shows up for an hour and gets a brief understanding of how to navigate the textbook to truly understand how you're supposed to teach the content in that textbook. And I think with the 1 hour PDs or the webinars, we're missing this whole, there's a lot of good stuff in these textbooks, but we're not connecting the dots, right? That one hit PD, that really quick, let's just get you started, is really not doing it to show teachers how to teach the content, what's the most important pieces within that content. I think when we used to, or when we do have the opportunity to spread out that PD, where we're focused on 1 or 2 units at a time, we'll come back in a month and we'll focus on the next 2 units. You really get to go deep into how do you actually teach the content and how are these related to the standards and to the MPs that we have in all the subjects. So those quick hit PDs are really making us suffer with the textbooks.
Thank you, Jonathan. Question for you, Marquis. What recommendations do you have for how to involve teachers in district adoption decisions? How broadly should teachers be engaged?
So a couple of recommendations. How broadly should teachers be engaged? Teachers are working with the students directly. Teachers should be engaged throughout the whole process, right? I've seen in very, very big districts and in extremely small districts that when communications doesn't happen between the people who are making decisions about what to select and teachers not involved, that district get locked into kind of like what Jonathan said, the contract where they have to be stuck with these materials for long periods of time, and then the materials aren't useful, and that will lead to people looking to supplement, right? So so the resources, the first part of the question, right? The resources teachers to use, like I said, they need to leverage to come together. They need to talk to the department chair, talk to other teachers, and use EdReports to kind of find what material is best. When it comes to adopting materials, districts want to make the best decision. No district wants to select materials that are low quality, right? So it's helping them and guiding them to form that decision by leading them to some place that they could trust. They, that they can see through the process. They can ask questions about the process, and they can interrogate the process. That would make people feel comfortable about it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And the last question, and this is an important one. So as a teacher and or district leader, and Jonathan, you feel free to take this one if you'd like. What supports for English learners or exceptional learners are teachers most looking for?
So at least my teachers are asking for the materials to be there, right? So what's happening is you prepare for a lesson and you realize it's not going to meet the needs of all students, and that's where we start to have to look for resources. I call it like the Sunday night Google search. And when I started at my district, I made that speech at the beginning of the year that I'm trying to eliminate the need to do the Sunday night Google search. I want it so the materials are there at your hands. So when you open up a textbook and you're ready to teach your lesson, the supports for special ed, the supports for gifted, the supports for EL are all built in there. We have all the research out there already. Like, we know how to intervene correctly. That research has been out since the 70s. We know how to support our gifted students, our EL students. All that material is there and all the research is there. So why isn't it in the textbook? Like, why are we searching Google on Sunday night to find that information? It should just be built in. And that's what my teachers are looking for, a place where I don't have to go searching the night before or the weekend before. They should just be able to open it up and pull those materials.
Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Well, wow, I wish we had more time. This has been amazing. Melissa, Marquis, Jonathan, I thank you so much for engaging in today's discussion. I know there's so many more questions coming in, and we'll do our best to answer those in our follow-up. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move us forward. So here is a list of the various supports that we provide here at EdReports. And we support states and districts directly in these 4 ways. We can also customize our level of support to meet your needs. So whether it's building awareness that you're looking for or signaling quality, if you need training and expertise and insight on local reviews or conducting your adoption process, we would love to learn more about your work and explore opportunities of working together. Lastly, you can reach out to our partnerships team at the email address at the top of the screen. Any one of us would be happy to meet with you and connect. Also, feel free to contact me directly at the email listed below my fabulous picture. As I stated earlier, there will be a follow-up email after today's webinar. And we just look forward to continuing this conversation. We look forward to talking more about why materials matter, instructional materials, and just staying connected, growing and learning together in this work. So we are continuing this amazing series. As I stated, I'll be facilitating for the next 2 weeks. So if you love what you heard today and you want more, definitely register. On August 4th, we'll dive more into findings 3 and 4. We're going to have a great conversation with 3 new panelists, and we're going to talk about what teachers want in high quality curriculum. And then we will close our series on August 11th. We're going to dive into finding 5, and we will have a conversation about the key factors for implementing high quality instructional materials with integrity. So again, please come back, join us again, register, share it with your networks, your peers. We would love to stay connected with you. And with that, we thank you so much for attending today's session. We talked about the use of standards aligned materials, and we look forward to diving in again next week. So we wish you a great rest of the day.